a nice way, but it ended up being hilarious.
Three, two, one, go.
Hello. God is dead, says Friedrich Nietzsche. Also Mike, he's not here. How are you doing? Tell us something about the ocean. What?
Yeah, I figured, start,
Figured you'd become shorter and also...
Yeah, grow out a beard.
And also, like, completely change your voice.
Yeah, I use my time well.
I hear a plant-based diet can do that too.
It's one hell of a week, let me tell you.
Yeah. All right, so... So the thing about wider society that I find the most interesting is the fact that people can end up coming to completely different conclusions about the same presuppositions. So it's very interesting to me to hear things from other people and discuss ideas about what they believe is right or what they believe is wrong, which I find even more interesting. It's also why I don't actually really like debates too much.
Okay.
Because it's just like what it usually ends up devolving into, in my opinion, is like sort of like the presupposition established when you say like let's have a debate is that okay, instead of us fighting, let's debate. And to me, it's just like okay, so it just seems like an evolution of fighting, which we all know is kind of it's not necessarily bad, but it's not helpful if your goals are just to bring people together.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I think there definitely is such a thing as help.
Ideas are equal each other by like, putting them in a sort of equal, I guess, position. But the thing is that like the only thing that makes ideas equal, and which is a really big important point, I think, is that ideas are just ideas. Like the fact that they are what they are makes them somewhat equal.
Yeah.
Even though you might not be able to apply one idea in one circumstance. They're notions, they're contrived thoughts.
Yeah, they're not. I think that's why I always hesitate to use the word belief whenever I say anything.
Yeah.
Especially referring to myself, is because I tend to sit on the fence on a lot of stuff, just because I find I learn something.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, that makes me rethink what I thought before. Yeah. That being said, sometimes I will find evidence and then I'll latch onto something and I get like super opinionated about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, like that, there's no way that this is wrong. And then like a year later, I'm like, oh wait, no, that's totally wrong.
So again, talking about ideas, the common people, they have ideas. I think the common people have more ideas than they ever before in the history of mankind. The level of communication we have with each other has only expanded and it keeps on expanding, and it expands exponentially to the point where it's almost as if there really is no such thing as private life, which is a very debatable idea. So I brought on this gentleman right here. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Joseph Clark. I graduated like with an illustration degree, so I guess I'm an illustrator. But like
you're whatever you want to be.
Yeah. But like now, right now I'm just working like a whatever job, part time. But so I don't know if you could give me like a title, but I suppose common man is a decent enough title.
Yeah, I mean you might not know who Joseph is. I mean, a lot of you don't know who I am. You might not particularly care about Joseph, but I mean, Joseph has ideas, and all of you have ideas, which of course I want to hear. Which is why I recently made a post saying that, hey, listen, if you are in the sort of greater Long Island area and you want to come on and discuss ideas that you have about society, about concerns you have about your life or the lives of the greater populace of the world, you can come on and talk about anything, I love, more than anything, including debates, I love thought exercises. So consider this a thought exercise. So, Joseph, you came at me with the ideas of contemporary nihilism and how it's on the rise.
Yes, so...
I want to hear what you have to say about that.
So this is something I've kind of... I mean, researched is kind of a like, it's a tenuous word.
You pondered.
Yeah, pondered, looked into. I hate to say the word research because then people will be like, well, what are your sources? And like, I'm like, oh, I got like 2. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just something I've kind of noticed and I want to discuss. So I guess I prepared a little couple questions I wrote down, mainly because I'm like essentially like a dog. Like if I see like a topic that strays even slightly, I'll just like chase it. So this will help me keep myself structured. Yeah.
And another thing about research is that with or without research, you really shouldn't discredit what people have to say, like off of face value.
I mean, there's something to be said for firing from the hip, even if it's not like, a super measured response. Sometimes you can just notice something and be like, that's kind of screwed up, and you don't necessarily have to have a Harvard study to back it. You know what I mean?
There's multiple layers to contrived thinking, and the thing that really distinguishes people who are highly educated from people who are not educated is that people who are educated tend to be able to parse that information well.
Yeah.
But continue on.
Okay, so
let's go to the first idea.
Sure. So my first kind of thought is I think that contemporary nihilism is on the rise right now, and the reason, well, I guess nihilism being defined first would help. So essentially, whenever you look up nihilism, like the first thing that comes up is nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. So that's like
that's nihilism.
That's the first thing that comes up. Yeah, that's the first thing.
And like what, like where, like Webster?
I think, again, I didn't cite my sources. But
But
so I'm pretty sure it's like Webster, like Oxford or something. Whatever.
Really? That's the.
Yeah.
Jamie.
No. I mean, I'm gonna take his word for it. But no. I don't mean to sound like a bad, but my point is.
You sound surprised though. So.
Yeah. No. It is surprising because like Can you read it to me again?
Sure. So nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. Now that's a sum up.
That's interesting because it's like that.
I think
that is very interesting. But continue.
One thing that might be tough to pick apart about that definition is can't be known or communicated. I think that's kind of the tougher part. I think
it seems new.
Yeah. I think what they're trying to say is, because I think a big tenet of nihilism is relativism. So I think it's not literally that nothing can be known. I think it's more nothing can be known for certain, and because of that, because you don't know anything for certain, you can't communicate those ideas because you have no authority on it.
Because you can't make people know exactly what you mean.
Because you don't know exactly what you mean either. Yeah, I think that's the idea. Yeah, because it sounds super radical, and I mean, I'll kind of show my hand right now. I'm pretty critical of nihilistic thought.
Same. Yeah.
Mainly because of this idea that things don't have value and that nothing, like this kind of relativist approach. I'm pretty critical of a lot of relativism unless I can see a huge basis of not evidence, but like a reason for it to be relativist, so that it would make sense. Because I think one of the issues with relativism is because if you take it to its extremes, it like always falls apart. Yeah. Because like
I guess you can say that's how it is with most forms of thinking, but like I feel as if there are certain kinds of formulations of thought that, when taken to the extremes, are especially heinous.
Yeah, more. Yeah, I mean, the thought exercise in my philosophy courses in college, I think it was like the third or fourth one I took. I forget which. He was like, he was like, I'm not going to accept relativism in my classroom. And some people were like, well, what do you mean? And then he went through this whole thought exercise, and he was basically like, all right, so in a relativist sense, essentially the culture decides what is okay. And everyone's like, yeah, you can't criticize someone else's culture. He's like, yeah, so we can't, criticize people for liking certain music or doing anything with their hair or whatever, right? And like that, fine, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And he's like, so then slavery isn't wrong. And everyone's like, oh, I see the problem now. Because that culture accepted that, the pre and post-colonial America accepted that. Yeah. And then everyone in the room's like, oh, right, that's a problem. You know what I mean?
So that's on nihilism. What about basically, let me know when you want to sort of stop your points so we can discuss them. But we stopped like kind of on the definition of nihilism. What else is
Sure,
there?
sure. So essentially, my thought was that nihilism's on the rise.
Okay.
I think in our in our generation or whatever,
Okay.
culture, whatever you want to call it specifically.
Okay.
And I think the reason for that, my kind of take on it, is I think there's a huge amount of despair. Like a much larger amount of despair in our generation than a lot of others. But I wanted to know, why do you think? Because that's only my take. So what do you think?
Show's over. No.
It's not. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's one of those questions where like I'm still not super satisfied with my answer.
Okay, so let me approach this piece by piece kind of. So nihilism being nothing has a basis of value. Like the values that things have absolutely no basis. So I guess if I were to bring that into a real kind of world-ish example, like a shiny coin isn't valuable actually, like inherently. It's just a shiny coin.
Sure.
And it maybe seems kind of appealing to the eye, but it really doesn't have any basis of value.
Yeah.
I completely reject the ideas of nihilism. I don't think. I think that it is a product of bourgeois thinking.
Ooh. Okay.
And I think that I think that when people start having so much less of what they have now, they're gonna start realizing that nihilism is just something that is completely not within their desired realm of actual thinking.
Okay.
The thing about nihilism, right, is that okay, so nothing has a basis of value. Like there's no inherent naturalistic foundation that you can point to. But the problem that I have is that like it's extremely moot in my opinion, because like it's almost as if you're being confronted with too many questions and you're just kind of just foraying them all into like the single bin of just not having a particular root of anything.
Yeah. So whenever I if I had to give a definition of nihilism, and I've been talking with some of my buddies kind of leading up to this discussion, I always described it as giving yourself to the void, essentially. Just completely throwing yourself into the abyss and just giving up, because that's what I always see it as. Because if nothing has value, if nothing has basis, then I wonder, well, then what's the point of your existence? And then oftentimes nihilists will answer, well, there is no point. And I'm like, okay, well.
But then the problem is that they don't even say that, because they'll say like, oh, it's what you make of it. Okay, so there's a point.
That's true. Yeah, they will.
So there is a point.
Yeah, but why? Okay, so then if we take that further, in a world where nothing matters, why does your opinion matter? Because if you can dictate what has meaning, that means your thoughts have meaning now.
Yeah. The true nihilists would have never even brought up the notion of nihilism.
Yeah, that's true.
They would have never even come up with the idea. They would have never told anybody. Like the true nihilists wouldn't even communicate their feelings about particularly anything.
I think that like a true nihilist, like someone who believes nothing is worth anything, would probably just like lay on the couch and stare at like the ceiling till he dies, right? Because you don't want to strive for anything. Nothing is worth anything, so why is life worth? You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people, even if they believe that their actions are sort of futile or whatever, they still do things.
Yeah.
So you obviously believe in some kind of reciprocity for your actions.
Exactly. There is a sort of drive that comes part and parcel with being designed. Mm-hmm. Like when I say design, I mean like we do have a kind of structure about us.
Yeah. I mean, and even from a purely like utilitarian view, like people at least can at least recognize that like here is something and that there is better and worse.
Yeah.
Like I think inherently people understand that. Like you put your hand on a stove and you realize it's better not to put my hand on a stove than it is to leave it there and burn.
Yeah.
So the idea that there could be no value is like that literally doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the nihilists, in my opinion, are kind of, they're looking for not necessarily an end to meaning. They're looking for an end to already contrived ideas, the things that they don't necessarily own. Like I feel as if the nihilists are kind of approaching life with a sort of jaded sense of, well, everything's already here, and so like nothing. What effort could I possibly add to this to make any meaningful change?
So you brought up an interesting point earlier where you said if people had less than what they did now, nihilism basically could not exist. It couldn't coexist with that.
Yeah.
So then what you're essentially saying is nihilism is a product of entitlement. Because
it's a product of, I think, a kind of decadence.
Yeah. Because if you're used to
Yeah.
things existing that are good, then you go, well, what does the world need me for? But I'm not even sure that's just nihilism. That just sounds like depression at that point.
Well, yeah, it's a there's a nihilistic depression. There's byproducts of this sort of thinking. But the problem is that, like, I think it's just a poorly contrived sort of idea, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The other thing is that so this idea of like things not being necessarily able to be communicated. Actually, I was gonna say something before I said that. I think I've come up with an idea of how you can sort of disprove this idea that nothing really has value easily with math. And it's just like, okay, so... Well, actually, no. There's a conclusion that you can draw that can maybe sort of reconcile this idea that you can do with math. And like, so the thing is that numbers have value.
Yeah.
And they actually do have value inherently.
Yes, yeah.
Like
you can consciously see an object and recognize that as one object. Yeah.
Even if you don't have numbers, even if you have no idea of numbers, so long as there are two points in between in space that you can actually see, the numbers exist and therefore value exists.
Yeah.
You can move from, like, so they say these are the two objects. You can move from this end of the object to there, and you'll notice that you have actively gained something.
Yes, yeah. You are not there.
Meaningful. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not there. I'm here.
Exactly.
I'm not. I'm not here. I'm there.
Exactly. Yeah,
Exactly.
And you can recognize, even just on a base instinctual level, you can recognize that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah. And I mean, obviously, nihilism was not dreamt up by the cavemen. This is a fairly recent idea.
Well,
so of course there is that element of. It couldn't have existed before because you had too much strife to care about nihilism in a weird way, even though nihilism's kind of like not caring.
Nihilism is that I think it's a conundrum in yourself that you have to face, and it's not necessarily that you're not facing it well. It's just that it's just a process.
Yeah.
Like as time goes on, you'll kind of reconfront these ideas and you'll be able to do something about them. And as the world around you changes, then you'll also be confronted with, okay, and is it still, like, how much of a duty do I have to this idea of nihilism? You'll have to, as time goes on, you'll have to question that.
How much is it, ironically, how much is it worth?
Exactly. Now, another thing is that, like, as 2 points between in a space exist, there also exists the concept of zero. Mm-hmm. And the thing about zero is that it's technically nothing, but it's also a value.
Yeah.
And that's why if you actually do look up what is zero, there's a dual value that it has. It's nothing, but it's also a value that has. It's also a concept that has value.
Sure, yeah.
So it's value for, representing the valueless.
Exactly. It's essentially how black is the absence of color. People say, oh, black isn't a color. It's like, well, it is, because we can still recognize it as different from blue, as different from green.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like. So zero, and like we were saying, you can recognize the difference between something existing and something not existing. So that the non-existence has a value because you can differentiate it from existence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty like solid answer of like essentially, like you said, you know, people have so much that it's very easy to kind of I guess detach yourself from its worth.
Try being the nihilist in the middle of a war zone.
Yeah, or like sub-Saharan like desert. Yeah, it'd be pretty tough. You'd probably be like, I want to live now. You know what I mean? Because it's like so bad.
It is so bad. But I guess you also talked about the rise of nihilism in this generation.
Yeah,
I think also that has something to do with it, but I actually don't think that we're nihilistic. I think we're actually extremely antagonistic to the to a lot of different things. Actually, I think there is a genuine sort of. I think we're extremely emotional and passionate now more than ever. Honestly, like I think the time of nihilistic skepticism is pretty much over. I think the rise of I'm using the word, I'm going to say activism, but I'm not using the word activism in the derogatory way. I'm using it literally for what it means. And activity, like active participation.
Okay.
I think that the time of active participation is on the rise. And there's going to be some costs and benefits to that. The costs is the dissolvement of the idea of privacy. But, I mean, at least things change, you know?
Yeah, that's...
I'm going to stop you right there. I don't mean to cut you off.
Sure.
But I want you to actually continue.
Oh, okay. So you want me to go to the next kind of point?
Yeah, okay. and then after you like sort of iterate that, then finish your thought.
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah. So my criticism of nihilism was essentially that my overarching criticism, I kind of outlined it here really quickly, is that it essentially permits all action, because if no actions have meaning, then none of the consequences of those actions also have meaning.
Yeah.
I think it essentially permits evil on like a grand scale very easily. And I think there's a lot of kind of thought systems that you could look at and be like, oh yeah, if you like take Kantianism and you kind of skew it, like you can do a lot of mean, like evil things and justify it. But I think nihilism at its core is like really messed up, because essentially what you're saying is like, oh well, who cares about murder if nothing matters, you know? Who cares about injustice if, you know, all the hierarchies are worthless anyway, so injustice is just part of it. There's like this like serious like kind of like I said, like giving yourself to the void. Like if you look at like literary like villains, like almost all of them kind of have an aspect of like giving up in a way, you know what I mean? They've given up on something. And I think when you just give yourself away like that, you permit like the most heinous acts you could think of. And that's my main critique of it. Not even like, because like I think logically you're right, it also doesn't make sense, but I come from like a moral standpoint of like, no, you can't be a nihilist, because like then you're a jerk, you know what I mean?
My only criticism to what you said is I think that okay, so there's a difference between disagreeing and rejecting, I think. If you reject something, then you completely reject its foundations, the upper branching out of whatever it might have created. You're basically uprooting the tree completely.
Sure.
Like the tree never existed, and that's kind of how I am with nihilism. You're not a nihilist until you die. Like that's the thing. Like, and even if you're dead, like how you're not thinking. So
that's
like,
fair enough.
Yeah. So if we're gonna stick with this idea that nihilism is something that you actually you have to reason out, then if you're dead, there's no reason. So I mean, well, what's even there to do? I don't think people actually give up. I don't think there's really a such thing as giving up. I think if if you encapsulate a series of actions in one system, and then you can point to one situation where someone's like, okay, I'm not participating in this anymore, and you can kind of say it's giving up. But if we're going to talk on like the grand scheme of things with like if we want to talk as grand as nihilism tries to go on about, then there's no part in it where you actually do officially give up by its own definition, you know?
Okay, that's an interesting. That's actually going to trail into one of my other points. Yeah. So and it kind of brings up an interesting notion of the essentially the idea that people can't be nihilist. I think they can, but I think there's kind of a caveat. I think it has to be a little tweaked. One of the things, and I just memorized it, so I'm just gonna talk about it. One of the things I bring up in kind of my mentally vomiting on paper. Yeah. One of my points was, so I'm super interested in like a lot of literary stuff, specifically horror. Horror is super huge. I love horror. I'm getting a thumbs up behind the
camera. Yeah.
And one of my, so I'm gonna say this tenuously because there's a big but. Okay. So one of my favorite authors is H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
However, he's not a good person, so let's not no. He's a horrible person.
He's a pretty bad guy.
I just like his stories.
I like his cat.
We're not going to talk about the cat. You guys are going to get in trouble if you say that cat's name. So like,
what an asshole.
No, like he just like the worst. He's like super bitter. He was born frail, so he took it out on the world, and like just awful person. But his stories are really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, there's also a second caveat with that where I only like specific ones. I tend to like more of his horror than like his... He kind of trails into like more just straight science fiction. And it kind of just gets really weird. I like the stuff that's more kind of visceral.
Yeah.
But one of the kind of concepts, and when you look it up, people have different terms for it, but the term I like was cosmicism, which is essentially the idea that man lives on a tiny planet, and he's not going to be able to do anything that matters because there's space gods that live in the stars that were infinitely more powerful than us that we will never be able to understand or even influence in the tiniest way.
He's beset on all sides by the endless unknown.
Exactly. And so I think that is a form of nihilism, which is to say your worldview, so to speak, isn't a worldview. Your worldview is a universal view. It's a galactic view. And when you have a view, I think that monumental, you could become a nihilist because you could say, well, in the scheme of the universe, what we do here probably won't matter. I'm not going to say it won't for sure because I'm not a Sith. I don't deal in absolutes. But
that's an absolute. I'm kidding. Go on.
Yeah, but yes, that is an absolute, which is the great.
Everybody knows what
the
Obi-Wan
great hypocrisy
means.
of that
Everybody
line.
knows what Obi-Wan means, though. But go on.
Yeah. So I won't say it won't matter. But in the grand scheme of things, like, we're probably not going to affect the universe, especially within our lifetime, in such a way that, let's say alien life, millions of miles away, notices.
Yeah.
So I think you could be a nihilist. I think you just have to be a cosmicist. I think you have to look at... and by the way, I still disagree with it because I think that's the wrong scope to have. Yeah. I think it's kind of like not the opposite of greater good thinking, but almost like greater nothing thinking, because greater good thinking is essentially like, I can do this horrible thing because something good is coming, whereas like this is essentially, I can do whatever I want because this other thing could render it all insubstantial, so who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think nihilism, I think there could be nihilists, but I think they all have to be cosmicists. Whether intentionally or knowingly or not.
So let me get this straight. So the role that cosmicism has in terms of nihilism is, you believe that if you want to be a nihilist, you have to sort of look outward to the greater nothingness that's out there in order to actually justify your belief?
I think you have to zoom out.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? I think you have, I think if you look at the world and think, you look at the world's issues, you're already not a nihilist.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
even if you care enough to like look at news, you're not a nihilist.
Yeah.
I think though, if you're the kind of person who zooms out their worldview so much that the world is this tiny speck of dust all the way in the distance,
Yeah.
then I think you're a nihilist, because I think you could just be like, oh, I think there are people that exist that go, yeah, but who cares? Because, you know, we're not going to affect Jupiter,
Yeah.
and we'll never affect Jupiter, so like, who cares?
I think like I said, I think you have to do that up until you either become a vegetable or just die. Like, if you want to be, I'm just saying, if you really want to be dedicated to this nihilism thing,
That's fair.
yeah,
That's fair.
But even then, you're sacrificing yourself on an altar, which is like the literal opposite of meaninglessness.
Yeah, it's literally a messianic delusion at that point.
You're literally. What's funny is that you have in a lot of these sort of fantasy sort of settings, these prophets of the apocalypse, of
Yeah.
the endless, meaningless void.
I guess in Lovecraft fiction, that'd be like the cult leader or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly, but it's so weird because like they profess that all things are meaningless and disconnected, and of course, what's the word? All things are disconnected and meaningless and deserving of destruction.
Yeah.
But the thing is that like it's the cult of no meaning. It's like the crusade for the nothingness. It's the crusade for the void. It's so weird.
Well, I think that's why they're often portrayed as villains. I think generally, if not culturally, although I do think culturally, but at least literarily, I think generally people look at like a group like that and they're like, yeah, that's the bad guy.
Yeah.
If you're just like rallying everything to the end times, you're probably like a scumbag. Like,
Yeah, this is why I love Warhammer 40K so much for that reason.
I mean, we could talk about. Chaos worshippers are literal like.
Yeah.
I mean, they're dogmatic nihilists in a way. They're the weird occurrence of where there's a villain, and I don't think it's a fault of writing. I think it's intentional. Where there's a villain who goes, "No, I am evil," and I accept that.
You got a question if you want to hear it.
Oh boy.
All right,
On Twitch.
take it to the bench.
Let me hear it.
Can you have nihilism as an adjective or an attribute as opposed to a primary belief?
What? Can you have nihilism as an adjective?
Or an attribute as opposed to a primary belief?
So like nihilistic thought as like an adjective.
Yeah, I guess as
But-
opposed to viewing everything as like overall nihilism, or just like having like beliefs in certain things. I guess I'm like, I don't know.
That's that's tough though.
That's such a
because-
tough question. I don't even know what he's saying.
Well, I think the idea is like, can you segment nihilism so that it's not your entire worldview, but like it's your view on politics, maybe. Like, all politics doesn't matter.
Oh wait,
that's my interpretation.
So
of
can
the
you just
question.
turn nihilism into like a sticky note? And just put on
Essentially,
things?
yeah.
I wasn't thinking that everything doesn't matter. Some things don't matter.
I think that's true of anyone though. I think everyone has like a thing where they're like, oh, who cares?
Oh well, okay. So
But-
what he's essentially saying is that you can approach nihilism with varying levels of analysis. Like, can you go down to the micro scale and then be a nihilist there, but on a macro scale be I don't know, an anarchist or a communist or whatever? Like that is, I feel as if that's what he's asking. Instead of it just being the crux of your entire belief system, which you think is faulty.
Probably. I mean, you can technically do that with anything.
Yeah, you
can
can.
technically break anything down to its basest form and divvy it up or break it down as much as you want.
Well, that's the thing I think he's asking though is can you? Well, yeah, kind of like what Steve was saying. Like, can you just be a nihilist in certain situations?
I mean, sure, but the issue with nihilism is it has such a totality to it.
Yeah. That
Just-
you're eventually just going to spill off into everything else.
Yeah, well, either that or again, like you said, you probably still aren't a nihilist.
Yeah.
By its definition, because you could say, oh, politics are meaningless. Like a lot of people who are into conspiracy theory, which by the way is not like not like a knock at, because people say conspiracy theory like, oh, you know, you're a whack job. I mean, if you're interested in conspiracies, because conspiracies do exist, like they do happen. You know what I mean?
Happen all the time.
Exactly. So like
they're happening right now.
Exactly. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, I'm sure a common line out of your mouth, I'm sure in like the last election, you're like, well, it doesn't matter because they're just puppets, they're just being handled. Politics is an illusion. So you are a nihilist politicist because you're just like, well, politics isn't.
There's actually no root values to politics because.
Sure.
And
my issue with that is that you could say that, and but then the issues that politics governs, like commerce, like communication, like wars, are you saying those don't matter? Because politics is just a vehicle.
Yeah.
It's not actually, I mean, I don't think politics has a quantifiable value like that. I think it's more a language than anything.
And then there's also...
There's an addendum to it, I guess.
Okay.
Let's go.
It says, and I quote, like, you can have no care for almost everything but still love your dog or family member. I guess if you love your family member, you can't be an
Okay, let me just say something. Okay, so in every philosophy, doesn't matter what it is, it can be even in mathematics, right? No, I'm telling you, even in mathematics, which, I mean, are we going to agree that mathematics is probably like the most grounded, meaningful, you know,
I think
notion that there is out there?
I would, yeah, I mean, I'd say mathematics is like, I mean, mathematics is the foundation of utilitarianism. Exactly. And utilitarianism is like one of the biggest philosophies, ways of thinking, because it's like it's the one where there's the least amount of issues, I think, of any philosophy.
So what I was gonna say is, like, even in mathematics there is a level of hypocrisy. Like, even if in mathematics, like, if I ever have a mathematician on, like someone who's really understands like quantum physics or something like that, he can literally disprove the idea of 2 + 2 equaling 4.
Yeah,
like there's a reasonable, well, cause there's a level of hypocrisy in mathematics. There's a level of hypocrisy in any philosophy, but the thing is that if a philosophy is going to be reasonable, well, if a philosophy is going to be legitimate, there has to be a reasonable level of it based on its scale.
Sure.
And nihilism, it's an unreasonable level of hypocrisy. That's like hypocrisy. I don't like to level it as a criticism against people or even ideas, but there comes a time when it's just so unreasonable and glaring in your face that you gotta answer to it.
So I think, again, though, nihilism is such a total thing, saying nothing has value.
Yeah.
Well, why do you love that thing?
Yeah.
Well, it makes me happy. Why is happiness better than sadness? Uh-oh. You know what I mean? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think you technically can. I mean, you could get into a kind of no true Scotsman debate where it's like, well, you could be a nihilist in this way and that way. I think if we take the definition as it's laid out, if nothing has value, I don't think you can love technically, because how could you show affection towards something? Because then it's like, well, why are you? Well, because I enjoy it. But how can you enjoy something when nothing has meaning?
So you just want to do whatever you want, basically. That's what it boils down to.
That's not even nihilism. That's like hedonism.
Well, no, that's what I mean. Like, it's kind of selfish in a way.
Yeah, well, because I think hedonism is essentially saying that anything that makes you feel good is good. Like I think that's
everything else is meaningless, but this dog is alright.
Exactly. So like I think hedonism's kind of core tenet is that pleasure is a moral good.
Yeah.
Now I'm sure there's different sects where they're like, well, if you're causing pain from your pleasure, then that's bad. Whatever. There's like, but I think that's the core tenet. Like that's where. That's your kind of the base of your tree that you build out from.
Yeah.
And so that's not nihilism technically, not really, because you just value things that feel good. Like ice cream and your puppy and whatever, like anything that makes you feel good, video games, that's all a moral good.
You can do the thing that some people do where they'll say like, but you see, that's just like a chemical reflex and I'm just doing this because this is a craving, this is sort of instinctual, but you're just admitting to yourself right then that there's a hierarchy of demands.
Yeah.
And the fact that I would definitely prefer water in the desert over ice cream. Like
Yeah.
there's a hierarchy of demands and wants,
Yeah.
and therefore water it means more than ice cream. It has to, like, or else why wouldn't I just take the ice cream or do an eeny meeny miny mo? Like, obviously you want the water.
Yeah, I think also that argument of like this idea that everything's just a biological whatever. That's I guess that's kind of like a scientific determinism in a way, and that gets like scarily close to like predestination, like old Protestant predestination kind of
Speaking
stuff.
of cosmic,
Yeah. I'm like that's just stuff where I'm like. Not that it's illegitimate.
Yeah.
Not that there aren't signs that, like, because I know there's been studies where, like, 9 times out of 10 humans tend to do this thing in this situation, so like we're very predictable.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can look at that predictability and chemical compounds and just be like, oh, well, that's the explanation for everything. And
Yeah.
and again, it's like a faux nihilism, or like, oh, it doesn't have meaning because it's all just compounds.
Yeah.
New comment. Sorry.
Let's do it.
What nihilism? I'm trying to understand because there's typos.
Okay.
Would nihilism? I guess it says right. Would nihilism fight human instincts to survive in the desert, even if they don't necessarily want to live? Their nature is to keep going.
I think.
Okay, so then wait. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Would nihilism fight human instincts to survive in the desert, even if they don't necessarily want to live? Their nature is to keep going.
Well, what does it
I
say?
guess the response.
I think it kind of just.
Could you be a nihilist in a situation where you're about to die?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a little bit.
I think you could, but I don't think anyone really has. I don't think anyone's ever been like suffering horribly and been like, this is fine, who cares?
Well, actually, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something very interesting.
Okay.
Because I'm very good at cataloging my emotions, like at particular moments.
Okay.
And so I was not to. I don't know. I'm not particularly into intersectionality, but trigger warning. Picture this. I'm in a car.
Okay.
There's a long road going from the one end of my block to the other end, and at the very end there's just a building. It's like a flat wall. I'm about to kill myself. I basically floor the, like I lead foot the gas, and I'm just zooming down like crazy. And in a brief moment before I hit the brakes, because obviously if I didn't, it would be a little weird. I'm standing here. There's this very, very thorough serenity. Absolute serenity. Like it's a farewell to anxiety. Total farewell to anxiety of any form. Because I mean, anxiety is a part and parcel of being human.
Yeah.
Like you have anxiety from when you're gonna eat next, to who you're gonna see next, to when you're gonna wake up next. But no, it's gone.
So you feel a peace from being on the brink because you recognize that you can leave all of the negativity of everything behind you.
Well, actually, I think in that moment I had already done it.
Okay.
So
Is it the adrenaline though?
That's possible.
you see that you guys are asking really good questions.
That's possible.
But I don't know. But all I know is that it was so peaceful. Like, imagine being in one of those chambers where the water's in equal density to the air,
Yeah.
and it was like it's kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like, it's one of those things where like people will cite. Whenever you look at, I'm gonna bring it back to literature because this is what I do.
No worries.
I like storytelling.
No worries.
When you look at like zombie stories or like post-apocalyptic stories, people will be like, "Oh, wouldn't that be great? You wouldn't have to work your 9 to 5. You wouldn't have to do this. You wouldn't have to do that." But there's a nugget of truth to that because there's a lot of, I mean, as our generations have gone on, I'm pretty sure on this because I've heard it said a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. I think depression has gone up, anxiety's gone up.
Yes.
Yeah. And,
in the United States, if we're gonna pick a place.
yeah, exactly. So there's some truth to, if you didn't have to work your 9 to 5 and you were surrounded by zombies at all sides, you actually might be a little more like internally peaceful.
Yeah.
Like you'd be more at peace with yourself, but I think that would just be because you'd have bigger concerns, not because you kind of came to a revelation that society's worthless or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's more just like, well, I don't care, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to live to the next day. So that being said, though, when people say that, I think there's an air of like, yeah, but that's only because you're used to how good it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that initial shift from, you know, a world where like essentially like you think of like The Purge, you know what I mean? Like where like you're just in constant danger. That initial shift, that shock of going from like safety to horrific danger would be catastrophically stressful. Even if you found peace in the loss of like the anxiety of whatever, you'd still, I don't know, you'd still be losing something.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you wouldn't feel it in that moment of adrenaline or in that moment of peace, but once you come to terms with it, I think you'd lose that.
Yeah. So I guess to answer the gentleman's question,
Or lady.
lady.
That's
that's
entirely
a
possible.
fair point. Yeah.
Is it
Twice, but still.
Yeah.
is it gentlewoman if it's
Yeah.
Is that the official?
Well, no, it's ladies and gentlemen.
You just say person.
Person works.
No, I'm kidding.
Human.
Human. Anyway.
Although that's assuming it's not someone's cat
But anyway.
typing on the keyboard.
But I guess to answer that question, I think you can come as close to nihilism as you can, but if the end result isn't you dying, you're not going to be a nihilist, unfortunately. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think if you value your own life, you're betraying your own tenets.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're a nihilist, I think, and like I said, I think a cosmicist could value their own life just out of fear, because even though their worldview says that their life is meaningless, I think they could still just be like, well, yeah, I don't want to die. That would suck.
Yeah.
And maybe a nihilist could do that too. Maybe a nihilist could have the same thing where it's like, yeah, nothing has meaning, but like I still don't want to endure pain.
Yeah.
But I still take issue with it, because then it's still like, well, that just means that you'll do whatever you can to be comfortable.
Yeah,
Which
there's
is-
a hierarchy of wants.
Yeah, but like again, it comes back to the moral issue of like, oh yeah, so then you just like you screw over your friends because it helps you. You know, you screw over whoever because it helps you.
Yeah.
So and then I guess that's where kind of hedonism and nihilism might overlap, or maybe
I guess the nihilist would say like, I'm not screwing over my friends because they don't have any meaning either. Like they're not actually my friends.
Yeah.
They're just floating specks of whatever in space.
It's kind of like the NPC meme,
Kinda.
where like you're just not treating people as people, so like you can just be like whatever.
Yeah, it's strange, but I guess to use the last moments we have to reflect on anything, this idea of cosmicism I thought was really interesting because I think I to maybe reflect on what Lovecraft was trying to get at when he was formulating his ideas. It seems that the sort of cosmic horrors, the reason why they're horrific is because of their scope. And the imagery, I think, is contrived by man, but I think that the scope that they exist on is what makes them very, horrific.
Yeah.
Like, and what it is, I think I think it's just the quintessential looking into the darkness and having it look back at you, which is why with Cthulhu the people tend to mutate and all that. And like they're assuming the darkness is look back at them and they're just changing because of it.
Or going insane.
Exactly.
That's another thing. I think. So just to put my final stamp on it, I think those ideas are super interesting. I really like the idea of cosmicism, but I still disagree with it. And I think if there's any literary reference I could make, because I like the idea of this unrelenting kind of evil, because I think that's very true to the human experience of like a Sisyphean like pushing the boulder up the mountain. But I think
very interesting. Yeah.
But I think the idea, I think as far as progressing as a society, I think is to get that boulder to the top, even though that's not what that story's about. But like. So there's a manga called Berserk, and it has a lot of Lovecraftian elements.
You've already captured my attention.
There has a lot of Lovecraftian elements, but the main hero, it's still ongoing, but he essentially gets victories. Like he wins. It takes everything, but he wins.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to take nihilism and put it in a context where it's actionable and you can actually live your life, but like still recognize there are huge forces outside of our control, but you can win the little battles.
Yeah. All right. So, in the words of Albert Camus, one might see. The guy who built Pushing the Boulder, his name was Sisyphus, right?
Yes, Sisyphus.
Okay. One should imagine Sisyphus happy. Yeah. 'Cause he wrote that in his essay.
That's a good quote.
All right. So, that was the show. Yeah. My name is Austin Andrews.
My name is Joseph Clark.
Where can we find you guys?
Jesus, where can you find me now? Okay, so I have multiple ways you can find me. On Instagram, I am at Drew Macia. I'm going to be going live on Twitch at like around 9. Probably, I might even go a little earlier since I don't have to drop off mic. No, I'm serious. It helps. But I might go a little earlier. I'll be playing Postscriptum and with some other friends of mine. That's at salty_c_gaming on Twitch. You got Instagram, huh, Joseph?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on like Instagram and anything. I'm like Jaded Mask. That's my handle. So like if you look that up, I'm almost always the one that comes up. I post art on there occasionally. I'm starting to write some short stories. Those might get posted up on there.
Cool.
So look out for that. And on Facebook, I'm just Joseph Clark. So I mean, you can find me there.
Fantastic. I am going to be actually posting more digital art for the certain episodes that we do as well. And another cool thing that I might be doing is, well, this. I mean, listen, if you actually, I'm serious. Like, if you want to come on and you have like genuine concerns, like I'm sorry if I'm not to make this go on any longer, but we all know the thing that happened with JonTron when he, went on Destiny stream. But the thing is, I found that really, really interesting because like a lot of people say that this is just him coming out of his shell, like and being like this evil person. But I think JonTron really was just fed up and he really didn't know how to formulate his thoughts. Right. And so like if that's you, like listen, come on. As long as you're not saying something crazy, like it's their ideas and they matter at least to you, or they should matter to you.
Pitch your idea to one friend, I'd say, or 2 or 3. See what they say, and if they're like, that's totally bonkers, maybe revise it.
Yeah, please don't come on my show.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So thank you all. This has been Tales from the Bottom of the Ocean, the greatest philosophy podcast of all time. Consider going to our Patreon if you like this. Patreon.com/area22. Donate. Give us $1, $2, some chewed up gum, please. Anything. I don't care. We're going down. All right.